Surely you've never pirated a video game, right? Have you ever been in the middle of a game and found that it keeps crashing or has missing features that leave you feeling frustrated and defeated? The answer is yes, and I'm afraid some fanboys on Twitter would like to have a word with you. I'm sure you've been there at one point or another. You're sitting in front of the family room computer browsing Newgrounds, and all of a sudden you discover what a torrent is. You see a plethora of media before you that you can have with just a click of a button. And you innocently download a copy of Frogger for the PS1, only for it to break upon playing, as well as infect your computer with ransomware. From technological prehistoric anti-piracy measures to the modern layers of copy protection that exist in today's latest releases, anti-piracy protections have spanned throughout decades of video game history. In today's video, we'll take a look at this cat and mouse game between pirates and game devs and go over various levels of anti-piracy that exist across many different video games from both the past and the present. Do not play the PC version of this game unless you know how to fix it yourself. Manhunt, the most controversial video game of the early 2000s, made its way to Steam sometime around 2008, and it's virtually unplayable without community-made patches. This is because the bugs existing in the anti-piracy protection for the original CD version are mistakenly triggered in the Steam edition. But how? Well, Rockstar was caught using a cracked version of the video game executable file for Manhunt, which they were first found doing with Max Payne 2. And in 2010, they replaced the cracked executable with one that had all of their anti-piracy measures enabled. This version is still being sold on Steam, with plenty of reviews to show dissatisfaction in Rockstar's apathy towards fixing a game that's for sale under their name. So what exactly is the problem? Well, we have doors that won't unlock, Ramirez being trapped in a room during Divided They Fall where you can't kill him without glitching into it, painkillers causing the game to crash when Cash is unarmed, and after 5 headshots, the controls vanish. No keyboard, mouse, or gamepad input, and the crosshair is gone. Want to save? Good luck. Want to be stealthy as the game intended? Never gonna happen. The hunters have superhuman senses now. You bought the game and Rockstar's punishing you for it. To top it all off, the game is certified Steam Deck playable, and needless to say, you're in for a headache unless you know what you're doing, and thankfully the community has stepped up with unofficial patches to make the game somewhat playable. If you don't think any of this is worth it though, there are better ways to play Manhunt, whether it's physically on a PlayStation 2 or through emulation. Just save your money. Rockstar does not deserve it for this one. What is something that you hate about a game that you love? See, I hate this, but I love this. So in Gary's mod, there was a more light-hearted approach to anti-piracy that ultimately made the joke of the person involved. Gary Newman, the creator of Gary's mod, decided to one day take a unique approach to dealing with piracy. Gary pushed out an update that specifically targeted pirated copies of Gary's mod, and within 15 hours, 2,500 pirates were caught. But how? By causing an intentional error that would crash the game upon launch with an error message unable to shade polygon normals. This error message also decided to include the Steam ID of the user who was trying to run the pirated copy as the error ID. The purpose of this was to expose those who pirated it. So if someone went to ask for help on the forums, they were exposing themselves as users with pirated copies. What's interesting about this piece of anti-piracy is Gary Newman's take on the whole situation. Him stating, quote, "It's cool, I've pirated as much as anyone else. It isn't meant to be some super DRM. Any DRM you come up with is going to be cracked, so why bother trying to make it hard to crack? Making it uncrackable isn't the motive here, laughing at them is." Clearly, as he states, it wasn't about making an uncrackable DRM, but it was about the community as a whole and just having some fun. He wasn't trying to punish or sue or to even stop anyone, as he knows DRM gets cracked anyways. Rather, he was trying to create a moment where the community can just have some fun with their pirating peers. So if you yourself have seen this error before, really you should reach out. I'm sure there's a forum of Gary's mod enjoyers that are more than eager to help you out. Let's talk about the crime of piracy on the neon-lit streets of Vice City. So Rockstar, Yeah, they're back again, and more defeated than before. If you didn't know, GTA 3 got pirated and released on a single PS2 disc by cutting some content. And let's just say Rockstar was determined to never let that happen again. And to prevent that from happening in Vice City, they definitely got creative with their anti-piracy measures. First, if the game detected any missing duplicate .image files, which were essential for the game's operation, it would activate two measures. The first, known internally as timer up, would mess with your CPU counter, causing the game speed to vary wildly based on your CPU load. So driving through Vice City would be near impossible. 1 second you're playing at double the speed, the next you're watching a slideshow. The second measure was supposed to corrupt the player's saved data, but this is where Rockstar had it backfire on them. The implementation of this was so flawed that it was virtually useless. Despite their efforts, another group managed to shrink Vice City down to 700 megabytes, stripping out all of the voice acting and music to do so. Would you believe it if I told you there was trouble with the PC version? Rockstar doubled down on anti-piracy for the PC version with a variety of measures. If the game since Securom copy protection had been tampered in any way, your sniper rifles wouldn't do damage. After 35 minutes of gameplay, garages would lock, paint sprays wouldn't work as intended, police roadblocks would make the map go blank, and the stats menu would be empty. There was even a chance that fire trucks would disable non-mission pickups. Despite all of this, piracy still thrived. Just as it's easy to evade the police in Vice City, so too is it that pirates can evade the measures of Rockstar. More than once, across various franchises. As Gary Newman said, people will always find a way. What do you think of when I say CD Projekt Red? Perhaps you think of The Witcher 3, perhaps you think of Cyberpunk 2077's launch, maybe you think of The Witcher 4. Okay, stop thinking. We're talking about the anti-piracy in The Witcher 2. CD Projekt Red wanted to take a hard stand against piracy with what might have been one of the most humorous and also controversial anti-piracy measures for the time. If you were playing a pirated copy of The Witcher 2 and you opted for the spicy romance scenes, your options would be replaced. Instead of that character that you thought you were charming, your results end up getting spicy with an old grandma. But of course, it doesn't stop there. CD Projekt Red went above and beyond for the worst and attempted to contact those pirates directly, giving them the ultimatum of paying for the game or facing legal consequences. They weren't shy about boasting their ability to identify pirates with 100% accuracy, claiming, quote, "We're addressing only 100% confirmed piracy cases that are 100% possible to prove." However, this blew up in their faces. The community backlash was swift, harsh, and justified, comparing these tactics to blackmail and extortion. So much for that reputation of player-friendly policies. Not too long after, CD Projekt Red issued an open letter to the community, expressing regret for their approach, and have since moved towards more consumer-friendly practices such as giving away free DLCs and embracing a no DRM policy with games like The Witcher 3. If you're watching this after early 2025, did Witcher 4 end up having DRM, or are they still holding strong to their policy? Let me know your thoughts. Just please no turf war below about Siri. SNES anti-piracy has a strange history. I'm sure you've seen the screenshots and the creepypastas of these, but a lot of what you hear about and see in passing is not real. This one is though, and for its time, it was one of the most sophisticated anti-piracy systems on the console. Donkey Kong Country 2 is a beloved game, and with it, an entire suite of anti-piracy measures that were far more thorough than anything else on the SNES. If your copy was deemed unauthorized, you would be greeted with one of two specific error screens, all depending on region, saying the game detected an unauthorized device. How these checks worked were pretty clever, but they could lead to false positives due to how the SNES's RAM behaves on boot. If you saw irregularity detected, it was not necessarily piracy. It could just be faulty system RAM. The game would also set a flag. If you powered the console off for 10 seconds and allowed the RAM to decay, the game would write "a thief" at the start of SRAM, and with the power back on, and if the test fails again, you'd then see the anti-piracy message. But if you were lucky enough, Rare would overwrite a thief and the game would end up loading normally. Let's go over a quick breakdown of the checks just to give an example of the depth of these anti-piracy measures. Skip ahead if you don't care too much about these. The boot state test would check if another program was running before Donkey Kong Country 2 booted up. If so, it's flagged. On the stack test, it checks if the reset vector was at the top of the stack. If yes, it fails, leading to issues like being sent back to the map after room transitions, or levels not unlocking after completion. There were also 3 types of RAM tests, looking for fingerprints of unauthorized devices or methods used by attached hardware to switch from its own code to the game's, and an SRAM size test to see if the game detects 0 kilobytes of SRAM. If it does, then nothing will happen. A checksum verification checks 544 bytes at the start of each level against a hard-coded value, and if it fails, the screen stops scrolling before reaching the goal, locking you out of the game. And finally, a reset vector verification ensuring that the game starts from the correct point. Clearly, Rare was dedicated to protecting their work and took the appropriate measures to prevent piracy. For the time, there's no denying how impressive this was, even if you're one of the unlucky players caught in this net. And if you were, let me know. I am genuinely curious. Okay, so we're not really done with Rare yet, or Donkey Kong for that matter. But for the Nintendo 64, Rare really went above and beyond to protect Diddy Kong Racing. Where Donkey Kong Country 2 was sophisticated, Diddy Kong Racing was bizarre. Rare's anti-tamper checks detected any unauthorized modifications or piracy. The game would react in very punishing creative ways, such as spinning heads, every racer's head spinning in a counterclockwise motion. Slow roads, the roads in the game becoming nearly impossible to drive on with increased traction, making it feel like you're moving in slow motion. Cursed audio frequency, the audio randomly changing every frame with frequencies modified by a random number between 0 and 10,000. Dead controllers? Self-explanatory, but all inputs from all 4 controller ports would be ignored. Inverted screen, the whole screen flipping and making it extremely difficult to race. Unbeatable adventure. This happens in adventure mode, and the cutscene where Taj gives you a gold or silver balloon would never appear, trapping you in a loop with no progression. Involuntary pause buffering. Every time you unpause, the game automatically presses the start button again, allowing only single frame advancement. Ghost balloons. Balloons you pick up would vanish before you could claim them, making collection impossible. Invisible vehicle parts. Your car ultimately just becoming invisible, racing without any visuals on your racer's cart. These measures were both for stopping piracy, but also making it a memorable, livable, and for some, I'm sure, entertaining experience. Strategy, RTS, you either love it or you hate it. And with the reign of MOBAs, the genre of RTS seems to be slowing down year by year. But that doesn't mean we can't ever go back to experience them. Command & Conquer Red Alert 2 is one of the classics, and with it, a unique way of handling piracy. If you were playing a pirated copy of Red Alert 2, you would only have about 30 seconds to enjoy the game until your base and units explode. Yep, everything's gone in only 30 seconds. Basically, this was Westwood Studios' message of, hey, buy the game. This measure, though, wasn't without its drawbacks. Seeing some trends here today? There were instances where legal copies triggered false positives. For example, if you were to install the base game, install the expansion, apply an update patch, and immediately jump into a game, the first boot might flag you as a pirate. Though just restarting the game could usually clear this and return things to normal on a second boot. Westwood was quick to act on this false positive mess though, quickly rolling out a patch to address it, making sure that only the pirated copies would experience these measures. Ultimately though, Westwood Studios took great care in fixing the problem for their paying users, and it serves as a reminder to other development studios to thoroughly test all measures and implementations before release. Have you ever dealt with seeing this happen for yourself? Were you one of the unlucky few to experience the false flag? Let me know. Do you have arachnophobia? In Serious Sam 3, if you're playing a pirated copy, your introduction to the game will be very different to a regular copy. When you pick up the pistol in the first level, an enhanced immortal version of the red arachnoid will spawn and it can't be killed whatsoever, even with cheats. It will just keep respawning until reaching the museum. If you were resilient enough to continue playing, in the 5th level under the highway, the game will lock your camera, forcing you to look up while spinning in circles, and the damage you take will be multiplied. The game also would typically save at checkpoints, and in the regular version, you'd be right. But in the pirated version, it would pretend to save. If you die, you're starting the game from the beginning, and when you quit the game, all of your save files are wiped. However, there is a bypass. If you install the game in a directory that includes the word Steam, all of the measures will be bypassed. To be honest, the pirated version is as much of a Serious Sam experience as it gets. So did you survive the red arachnoid? Earthbound, one of the most iconic and influential games ever made. And if you've been on this channel before, you've heard its music here and there. The developers of Earthbound really created a robust system for anti-piracy. And for those of you who enjoy emulators, don't worry, this won't affect your experience at all. Earthbound has 5 layers of anti-piracy protection, each more creative than the last. In layer 1, we have region protection. Right away, the game checks the console's PPU to ensure it's not running on a PAL SNES. If it detects a PAL system, an error screen appears and the game freezes. In layer 2, there's an SRAM check. At startup, it looks for exactly 8 kilobytes of SRAM. If there's more than 8 kilobytes, it would be identified as a copied cartridge, a warning screen would appear, and again the game would freeze. In layer 3, we have increased enemy encounters. If the first 2 layers are bypassed, the game increases the enemy encounters to make adventuring nearly impossible. Enemies appear where they typically wouldn't, and it was possible that in some instances, the game would crash due to the amount trying to be spawned at one time. In layer 4, there's another SRAM check. This check happens 6 times during gameplay, and it's actually unknown as to what it does, but it's one of the more mysterious parts of the protection layers, and if you know, leave it down below. And for the final layer, layer 5, if all previous layers are disabled, the final measure occurs after a key plot point in the game. After the devil's machine is turned off, the game hangs and the save files get wiped. So basically, the game is doing everything in its power to stop you. And if you're clever enough to make it to the end, it just won't let you finish. And if you're sadistic, you can enter cheat codes to experience these measures for yourself firsthand. Nintendo is nothing but dedicated to stopping piracy, and just as it was back then, it's very evident of their pursuit of pirates today. If you're like me, you think that there should be more video games made in the Lord of the Rings universe and in Middle-earth as a whole. And here we're taking a look at the Lord of the Rings Return of the King video game, which also, if you're like me, you're surprised to learn that this has anti-piracy measures in place. The anti-piracy measures for this game were simple but effective. First, there's a chance upon completing a level that the game will simply crash. Frustrating, but it does the job. And if it doesn't crash, well, good luck beating any further levels because a third of the game's levels can't be completed. If you're still in it though, you get to play as Sam for the entire game. This makes co-op useless and makes the difficulty that much harder. Okay, so you're still going strong. Well, your experience points are massively reduced, slowing all progress effectively. These measures were punishing, frustrating, and overall effective in their methods. It wasn't just about stopping the piracy, it was about brutally punishing and handicapping the player, but I'm sure some of you aren't so opposed to this either. If you've been able to experience this firsthand, let me know. ARMA 2. It had a unique approach to anti-piracy with measures they've named Degrade and Fade. With Degrade, the game gradually deteriorates the player's experience over time, making it eventually unplayable. This was done through things like worsening accuracy, where, as the method suggests, your accuracy gets worse as the game goes on. Visual disruption, where the screen becomes wavy and disorienting, making it impossible to focus. And then there's Fade, where controls for vehicles in the game become erratic, choosing to reverse, choosing when to start and stop. And the ARMA 2 logo could just start spamming itself on the screen, which could also be done under Degrade. And then there's a chance that your character turns into a bird, flying aimlessly with a message that reads, "Good birds do not fly away from this game, you have only yourself to blame." Like with others in this video, this was not just about halting piracy, but about making it as much of a bizarre experience for the pirate as possible. Spyro is a franchise that is beloved by many and forgotten by some. But what you may not know is that there was a lot of depth to the anti-piracy measures, or as the devs called them, booby traps, for the game. It wasn't just about stopping the piracy, but it was about playing a game of cat and mouse with the video game crackers of the time. Rather than outcoding the pirates, the goal was to outthink them. The game would check for alterations or broken copy protection, and if found, it would trigger traps, making the game harder to crack. There was detection at runtime, which were checks done in memory, allowing them to be placed anywhere in the game, making the removal extremely difficult. The goal of this was to slow pirates down, helping the initial sales of the game. Spyro had 4 layers of protection. The first being the usual copy protection, halting the game early and counting on the pirate to only bypass that initial barrier without testing further. The goal here was to catch the lazy pirates who would bypass that and ship the rest of a still broken copy. Most protections in the game were off camera, affecting levels beyond the one the player was currently in. For Spyro, a game about collecting eggs and gems as a key mechanic, these protections would remove collectibles, thus making any progression impossible. To further confuse the pirates, there were random language changes in the European version and occasional game crashes. This was less about breaking the game and more of a measure to annoy the pirates to make the efforts to crack the game less appealing. All of these measures combined, if you couldn't guess by now, were meant to cause confusion and annoyance, to create uncertainty if the pirate removed a protection or a layer, as the removal of one still meant something was broken down the road. But it was only a matter of time before everything became bypassed, the vulnerability ultimately lying in the fact that copy protection was only checked at boot, allowing crackers to restore the game's data to its original state post-check. The world of video game piracy is wild, and it seems to be more and more popular by the day. Whether you've experienced these or not, it's fun to see how companies, especially in the 90s and early 2000s, handled dealing with piracy on such a fresh medium trying to find its footing. Do you have something else that wasn't in this video that you want to share with others? Leave it down below, whether it's something you know or have a personal experience with. It'd be cool to see what's out there. But anyways, that's all for now. If you like this video, turn on notifications and check out my video on malware in video games. See ya.